The Opus 31 number 2 sonata is known as the Tempest because when asked by his biographer and associate Anton Schindler for an explanation of the sonata, Beethoven allegedly replied, "Just read Shakespeare's Tempest." Apparently, this was also an explanation of not only the Tempest Sonata, but also of the Opus 57, which later became known as the Appassionata Sonata. The Tempest is the final play written by Shakespeare and deals with existential themes and subjects, including tragedy, comedy, and romance, although formally it is characterized in the genre of a romance because of the spiritual transformation of the main character, Prospero. Northrop Frye, one of the most influential Canadian literary critics, comments that grace in all of Shakespeare's romance plays functions in many ways, but the major one is this: to show the power of God that makes the redemption of humanity possible. So in the play, the protagonist, Prospero, is a king banished to a remote island and is given godlike powers with the help of a spirit, Ariel, which ultimately allows him to alter the course of events, change reality, and secure his fate, all the while undergoing a transformation from a revenge to a vision of reconciliation. Shakespeare is making a profound statement on the human condition, suggesting that our natural instinct is inclined towards violence and revenge, but our higher faculty, call it our spiritual element, exemplified in the play by the spirit Ariel, raises us to the nobler action of compassion and forgiveness. Also, as a sub-theme in the play, we have the burgeoning romance between Prospero's daughter Miranda and the Prince Ferdinand from the shipwrecked party. And this can be an allusion to the romantic slow movement of the Tempest Sonata. But to be clear, the Tempest Sonata is not programmatic music, and it would be futile to try to envision which part of the music refers to what corresponding part of the play. As we recall, even for the Pastoral Symphony, which had descriptive titles for each of the movements, Beethoven added a subtitle stating, "More an expression of feeling than tone painting." So the D minor Tempest Sonata is imbued with a tragic vision. Perhaps it is this futility in the face of omniscient power, which parallels a tragic ironic association faced by Beethoven's impending deafness. The sonata hovers between an improvisatory realm and a very relentless driving pathos. It is also known as the recitative sonata because of the prolonged recitatives in the recapitulation. And it is interesting to note that there's also an oboe recitative in the recapitulation of the Fifth Symphony. So the Tempest Sonata and the Fifth Symphony, they're both concerned with concepts of fate and tragedy, and there are spiritual parallels between these two works, much like we witnessed between the Pastoral Symphony and the Pastoral Sonata. Although the Fifth Symphony undergoes a transformation, moving from a tragedy to apotheosis as it breaks from C minor to a glorious C major in the finale. In that sense, though, the Fifth Symphony is more aligned with the transformation of Prospero's character in Shakespeare's play. The Tempest Sonata, on the other hand, does not have a triumphant ending. There's perhaps no deliverance for the restless soul. But the idea of catharsis does not always have to be interpreted with the dualities of tragedy and apotheosis. Something suggested by Andras Schiff in his fascinating lecture recitals of the complete Beethoven sonatas recorded in Wigmar Hall. Many artists and scholars, including the young Canadian pianist Stuart Goodyear, who writes on the subject in the liner notes of his complete Beethoven sonata recordings, interpret, for example, the Appassionata Sonata, the most tempestuous of the Beethoven sonatas, written just a few years after the Tempest, as being a cathartic experience for Beethoven in the sense that the pathos of the music provides psychological release and relief through the expression of strong and previously repressed emotions. Seeing that the Tempest Sonata is written in a similar vein and the themes of fate and tragedy run strongly through both sonatas, we can also envision Beethoven as writing these works as a way of coming to terms with his own personal tragedy and infirmity. It's a sort of Beethoven as Prometheus, the creative and rebellious spirit rejected by God, who angrily defies him and asserts himself. 20 years later, of course, Beethoven realizes his ultimate catharsis with the negative-positive dialectic in his final sonata, Opus 111. Hans von Bülow, the famous Liszt pupil and the first editor of the Beethoven sonatas, proposed this sonata as an ultimate representation of samsara and nirvana.